Do you remember the good old days when things were simpler? When families gathered for picnics, neighborhoods were close-knit, and evenings were spent watching TV together? Let's take a nostalgic journey back in time and see how much you remember about the era that shaped a generation. Get ready to test your knowledge with 50 questions every baby boomer should know. From classic cars to iconic TV shows, let's dive into the past and relive those cherished memories. Question 1. What was the first credit card introduced in the 1950s? The first ever credit card was the Diners Club card, introduced in 1950. It started as a way for business people to cover their meal expenses, but quickly expanded to other types of purchases, paving the way for modern credit cards. Question 2. What was the top TV show in the US during the late 1950s, featuring a family with two mischievous boys? The top show was Leave It to Beaver, which aired from 1957 to 1963. The show became a symbol of idealized American family life, with the Cleaver family navigating everyday life, including the antics of young brothers Wally and Beaver. Question 3. What early 1960s car became an instant classic and was marketed as the car for the young at heart? The Ford Mustang, introduced in 1964, was marketed as a sporty and affordable car for young drivers. It quickly became an iconic American car, beloved for its stylish design and performance. Question 4. What dish, often made with gelatin, was a common sight at baby boomers' family dinners? Jell-O salads were a staple at family dinners during the baby boomer era. These colorful, often fruit-filled gelatin molds were both a fun and inexpensive way to create a fancy dish for gatherings. Question 5. What children's TV show, hosted by a friendly cowboy, became a hit in the 1950s? It was the Howdy Doody Show, hosted by the friendly cowboy Buffalo Bob. It was one of the first nationally televised children's shows in the U.S. and featured a lively mix of puppets, including the famous Howdy Doody and live-action segments. Question 6. What form of media did many baby boomers rely on to catch up on world news before the rise of the internet? Boomers turned to newspapers to stay informed about world events. In an era before the internet and cable news, the daily newspaper was the primary source for everything from local happenings to global headlines. Question 7. What toy allowed kids to create art by turning knobs to move a stylus across a gray screen, introduced in 1960? The Etch. A sketch was introduced in 1960 and became a beloved toy for kids. With its simple knob-turning mechanism, it allowed children to draw and erase endlessly on a plastic gray screen. Question 8. What popular 1950s to 60s hairstyle named after a bird was a big trend for women during the era? The beehive hairstyle became a fashion sensation in the late 1950s and 1960s. Named after its resemblance to a beehive, the towering hairstyle was seen as glamorous and became iconic during that era. Question 9. What product, introduced in the 1950s, became famous for being strong enough for a man, but made for a woman? Secret deodorant was introduced in the 1950s with the slogan, "Strong enough for a man, but made for a woman." It became one of the most well-known products marketed specifically for women's needs. Question 10. What piece of kitchen technology, first introduced in the 1960s, made reheating leftovers a breeze? The microwave oven revolutionized home kitchens when it became widely available in the 1960s. It allowed families to quickly heat or reheat food in minutes, making meal prep faster and easier than ever before. Question 11. What famous TV variety show starring Carol Burnett aired from 1967 to 1978? The Carol Burnett Show was a beloved variety show that ran from 1967 to 1978. Carol Burnett's comedic genius and her memorable skits made it one of the most popular shows of its time, leaving a lasting impact on American television. Question 12. What piece of 1950s technology made it easier to keep your house cool during hot summers before central air was common? The window air conditioner became a popular and affordable way to cool homes during the 1950s. It allowed families to stay comfortable during the summer months long before central air conditioning became widespread. Question 13. What soda, known for its distinct flavor, became one of the most popular drinks in the 1950s? Well, 7-Up, with its lemon-lime flavor, became a hit in the 1950s. Marketed as a refreshing and crisp soft drink, it became a favorite for both kids and adults during that decade. Question 14. What type of records did people play before vinyl became widely available? Before vinyl, 78 RPM records were the standard format for music playback. Made from shellac, these heavy and fragile records played just a few minutes of audio on each side and were later replaced by the more durable and higher quality vinyl. Question 15. What iconic amusement park opened its doors in 1955 in Anaheim, California? Disneyland opened in 1955, becoming the first ever theme park of its kind. It brought Walt Disney's magical vision to life and became an iconic destination for families and children around the world. All right, here's question 16. What invention introduced in the early 1950s allowed TV viewers to watch pre-recorded shows for the first time? Well, the answer is the videotape recorder, or VTR. Introduced in the early 1950s, this device allowed TV shows to be pre-recorded and broadcast later. This innovation really changed the television industry, making it easier to air shows outside of live programming. Moving on to question 17. What was the first toy to be advertised on television? The answer is the Mr. Potato Head. It was the first toy to ever be advertised on television, back in 1952. It became an instant hit with children and helped set the standard for future TV toy advertising. And now, question 18. What was the name of the system that allowed families to record TV programs on tape for the first time in the 1970s? The answer is the VCR, or video cassette recorder. Introduced in the 1970s, it allowed families to record their favorite TV shows on tape and watch them at a later time. This breakthrough technology brought a whole new level of convenience to television viewing. Question 19. What large musical device was a staple of teenage bedrooms in the 1950s and 60s? The record player, or turntable, was a common sight in teenage bedrooms during the 1950s and 1960s. It was used to play vinyl records, and teens would often gather around to listen to the latest rock and roll hits. Question 20. What popular drink mix, first marketed in 1957, became an instant hit with kids and parents alike? Tang, first marketed in 1957, was a powdered drink mix that quickly became a hit. It gained even more popularity after it was used by NASA astronauts on their space missions, making it a household name. Question 21. What fast food restaurant was known for its speedy service system before becoming an international giant? McDonald's was originally famous for its speedy service system in the 1940s and 50s, which revolutionized fast food by focusing on efficiency and speed. This system laid the foundation for McDonald's to become one of the largest fast food chains in the world. Question 22. What iconic car was first introduced in 1964 and became a symbol of American muscle cars? The Ford Mustang made its debut in 1964 and quickly became a symbol of the American muscle car era. Its stylish design, power, and affordability made it a huge success and a beloved car for generations. Question 23. What was the name of the first satellite launched into space by the United States in 1958? The first U.S. satellite, Explorer 1, was launched into space in 1958. It marked the beginning of the United States' involvement in the space race and was crucial in discovering the Van Allen radiation belts. Question 24. Which American TV show, premiering in 1951, is credited with shaping modern-day sitcoms? I Love Lucy, which premiered in 1951, is widely credited with defining the modern-day sitcom. Its clever writing, memorable characters, and use of multiple cameras made it a groundbreaking show that continues to influence TV comedies today. Question 25. What type of music became widely popular with young people in the 1950s, making parents worry? Rock and roll burst onto the scene in the 1950s, capturing the hearts of young people while making many parents uneasy. Artists like Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry became household names, and the genre defined a new era of rebellion and youth culture. Question 26. What iconic doll was introduced in 1959 and became a staple in children's toy boxes? The Barbie doll was introduced by Mattel in 1959 and quickly became one of the most popular toys for children. With her fashion-forward outfits and endless accessories, Barbie became an iconic figure in toy history. Question 27. What was the name of the first human spaceflight program in the United States? The Mercury program was the first human spaceflight program in the United States. It ran from 1958 to 1963, with the goal of putting a man into orbit and returning him safely, which it achieved with astronaut John Glenn's historic flight in 1962. Question 28. What famous speech did Martin Luther King Jr. deliver during the 1963 March on Washington? Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic I Have a Dream speech during the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. His stirring words about racial equality and justice resonated with millions and became a defining moment of the civil rights movement. Question 29. What fast food chain became famous for its slogan, "Have it your way," in 1974? Burger King launched its famous "Have it your way" slogan in 1974, allowing customers to customize their orders exactly how they wanted. The campaign emphasized choice and convenience, setting the chain apart from its competitors. What was the first major American sporting event to be broadcast in color? The 1954 Rose Bowl was the first major American sporting event to be broadcast in color. This historic moment marked the beginning of a new era in television, offering viewers a more vibrant and engaging viewing experience. Question 31. What famous comic strip about a lovable dog and his friends began in the 1950s? Peanuts, created by Charles M. Schulz, debuted in 1950. Starring the beloved character Snoopy and his owner Charlie Brown, it became one of the most popular and influential comic strips of all time. Question 32. Which 1969 historical moment shaped American society? The Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969 was a defining moment in American history. When Neil Armstrong took his first steps on the moon, it symbolized technological triumph and fulfilled the nation's dream of space exploration, leaving a lasting impact on the world. What did baby boomers use before refrigerators? Before refrigerators became common, boomers' families relied on ice boxes, which used large blocks of ice to keep food cool. Ice would be delivered regularly, and the icebox acted as an early form of refrigeration. How did remote controls differ in the 1950s? the 1950s, remote controls were bulky and often wired, unlike the sleek wireless remotes we use today. The first TV remotes used ultrasonic waves to change channels, and they weren't as reliable or responsive as modern remotes. What breakfast drink came in a glass jar? Tang, a powdered orange drink, was first sold in a glass jar and became incredibly popular in the 1960s after it was used by NASA astronauts during space missions. Boomers remember it as a breakfast staple that symbolized innovation. Which shaving cream brand revolutionized the market? Barbasol revolutionized the market with its no-brush, ready-to-use shaving cream in a pressurized can. Launched in 1921, but gaining popularity in the post-war era, it simplified the daily grooming routine for millions of men. What was a rarity until the 1960s? Air conditioning was a luxury rarely found in homes until the 1960s. It became more accessible as window units and central air systems were developed, making summer heat more bearable for families across the country. What is no longer heavily censored? Television and movies were much more heavily censored in the 1950s and 1960s, especially when it came to depictions of violence and romance. What was a common material for milk delivery? In the mid-20th century, glass bottles were the standard for delivering milk. These eco-friendly containers were collected, cleaned, and reused by local dairies, making them a sustainable option before the rise of plastic and cardboard packaging. Question 40. What material helped receive better TV reception? Aluminum foil was often wrapped around the rabbit ear antennas on televisions to improve reception. This trick was used to get a clearer signal, especially for channels that were harder to receive. 41. What type of fuel did cars use before unleaded gasoline became common? Cars in the 1950s and earlier ran on leaded gasoline, which was used to enhance engine performance. However, the harmful environmental and health effects of lead led to the eventual phase-out of leaded gas in favor of unleaded options. Question 42. What toy became a huge fad after being featured on the Mickey Mouse Club in 1957? The hula hoop became a massive craze after being featured on the Mickey Mouse Club in 1957. Kids all across the country were spinning hoops around their waists, and it remains an iconic symbol of 1950s childhood fun. Question 43. What was a common practice for boomers when they were school kids? For many baby boomers, starting the school day with the Pledge of Allegiance was a routine part of their mornings. It was a way to promote patriotism, and students would stand, place their hands over their hearts, and recite the pledge together. Question 44. How did broadcasting stations end their daily programming? Before 24-hour TV became the norm, broadcasting stations would end their daily programming by playing the national anthem. Afterward, a test pattern would often appear until programming resumed the next morning. Question 45. What piece of clothing was mandatory for girls to wear to school? During the 1950s and 60s, it was common for girls to be required to wear dresses or skirts to school. Pants were often not allowed for girls, and it wasn't until the late 1960s and early 70s that dress codes began to relax. Question 46. What was different about phones in the 1950s? In the 1950s, phones had rotary dials, meaning users had to rotate the dial for each digit in a phone number. Calls were often routed through operators, and long-distance calls were a bigger deal, requiring planning and sometimes appointments to be made. Question 47. What dairy-based refreshing sweet is rarely seen today? The malted milkshake, made with ice cream and malted milk powder, was a popular treat in soda shops and diners. Today, while milkshakes are still common, the malted version has become much rarer. Question 48. This meal was revolutionary in the 1950s. Can you guess it? The TV dinner was introduced in the 1950s and was considered revolutionary. It allowed families to enjoy a full meal that only needed to be heated in the oven, making mealtime more convenient and aligned with the growing popularity of television. Question 49. How would boomers purchase milk? In the 1950s and early 60s, milk was often delivered directly to homes in glass bottles. Milkmen would leave fresh milk on the doorstep and collect the empty bottles for reuse. Question 50. How did boomers make coffee back then? Boomers often made coffee using percolators, which brewed coffee by cycling boiling water through coffee grounds. This method was popular before drip coffee makers became the standard in the later decades. Wasn't that a great stroll down memory lane? From gathering around the TV for your favorite shows to using rotary phones and having milk delivered right to your doorstep, those were the days when life had its own special charm. Baby boomers lived through an era full of one-of-a-kind experiences and memories that still bring a smile to our faces. If this quiz brought back some fond memories for you, be sure to share it with others who remember the good old days. Don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgic quizzes and videos that take you right back to the moments that shaped your life. Thanks for joining us, and we can't wait to take you on another trip back